All right, we'll note that all trustees are present.
Approval of the minutes for 98 meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Comments by the chair.
All right. I'll take it from here, if that's okay then. One housekeeping item. At the bottom of your agenda, it says the next meeting is tentatively scheduled for September 7th. That should be August 31st. So sorry about that. So the first item we have for the agenda today is external audit of the retirement plans. Clifton Larson Allen, our external auditor, is on the phone. We have Jock and Stacy Young to present the retirement plan. So Jock and Stacy, you can take it away.
This is Jock. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So, good morning. Yeah, thank you for allowing us to present our audit results to the committee this morning. I'm a principal in our St. Louis Employee Benefit Assurances Group. And as Tim noted, Stacy Young is also on the call. She's a director in our St. Louis Employee Benefits Assurances Group. So this morning, we're going to talk through the audit services provided for the 2020 plan years. I know you have copies of our reports and letters. We're going to use the PowerPoint materials for purposes of this meeting to review the results. So if you want to advance to the table of contents in the PowerPoint. So on the table of contents, these are the items that we'll cover this morning. We'll talk a little bit about what we actually do. We'll cover some high-level plan highlights. Then there are certain items that must be communicated at the conclusion of all audits, which again we'll cover. And then lastly, we'll discuss internal control matters related to all three of the plan audits. You can advance to the next page. So we have finished all of our required audit procedures. The reports are signed and are being provided for your approval this morning. We want to thank you again for the opportunity to work with you, and we appreciate the work of management and staff assisting us in completing our procedures. Under the scope section on this page, you'll see that our engagement includes us providing separate opinions on the financial statements on the three retirement plans. So the pension plan, the defined contribution plan, and the deferred compensation plan. Additionally, we also are required to report on any internal control findings if we become aware of any. And lastly, we provide required communication letters on each of the plans. You can advance to the next page. So on this slide, we're just trying to give you an idea of some of the areas that we test in relation to our work. We don't audit all transactions, but instead we perform what's called a risk-based audit that allows us to focus on areas of more significance or risk. The areas where we spend more time are noted on this slide. So we test employer contributions and employee deferrals to make sure the correct amounts are being attributed and allocated to participants. We test evaluations of the investments in the plans and the related investment income. We test notes receivables from participants and benefit payments to make sure participants are correctly receiving distributions from the plans. We review plan expenses to make sure that they are appropriate. And we spend a fair amount of time testing participant data that is utilized by each of the plans, as this information gets used to determine everything from employee eligibility to vesting, employer contributions, and accumulated benefit obligations. Again, this isn't a comprehensive list of all of our procedures, but we're just trying to give you an idea of what type of work that we do in relation to the audits. You can advance to the next slide. This page is a summary of high-level results, financial results of the pension plan. And this information is taken from the completed audit report, which you have copies of. It's a plan covering over 1,400 participants. The net position of the plan increased about $31 million in 2020 to over $326 million. That's a result of income made up of investment income and contributions outpacing benefit payments out of the plan. So you can see investment income is about $38 million and contributions were about $13 million, while benefit payments out were about $19 million. So the net result, again, is net position increasing in the plan. You can advance to the next slide. This next page summarizes the results of the deferred compensation plan. So again, this information is taken from the completed audit report, which you have copies of. This plan covers about 800 participants. So net position of this plan increased about $17 million in 2020 to over $93 million. Again, that's a result of income made up of investment income and contributions outpacing benefit payments out of the plan. So you can see investment income is about $16 million and contributions were about $5 million, while benefit payments out were only about $3.5 million. So again, income higher than disbursements out, so the net position is increasing in the plan. You can advance to the next slide. This last summary is a result of the defined contribution plan. So this plan covers close to 600 participants, and the net position of the plan increased in this one also about $5 million in 2020 to almost $18 million. So again, that $5 million increase in net position is a result of about $2.7 million of investment income, as well as $2.7 million of contributions. And benefit payments out of the plan were only about $400,000. So once again, investment income and contributions outpacing benefit payments out, creating a result of net position increasing. You can advance to the next slide. So those were the summarized financial results of the plans. Now we'll cover the required communications related to all three of the plan audits. So what I'm about to cover is included in the separate letters that you should have copies of on each of the plans. There's a separate letter for each plan, but the communications are essentially the same, so we'll cover it all at one time here. So the financial statements are yours, not ours. Our job is to express an opinion as to whether they are materially in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. We do review internal controls as part of the process, and we communicate any weaknesses we come across, but we do not issue an opinion on internal controls. The communication letters that we're talking about now note that the financial statements should only be used in their entirety, and our approval is required if the audit report is used in conjunction with any other prepared document. Additionally, we perform no procedures beyond our report date. You can advance to the next slide. So management sets the accounting policies. Generally, all significant accounting policies can be found in Note 1 to all three of the financial statements. If you have questions regarding how something is accounted for in the financials, generally you can go to Note 1 and find it there. All accounting policies are in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles, and no unusual transactions were noted during the audits. Regarding accounting estimates are used in the preparation of all financial statements. The most significant estimates used in these financial statements were related to either actuarial assumptions used in determining the net pension liability or the valuation of investments. We audit significant estimates in our audit procedures, and they all appear reasonable in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. You can go to the next slide. All significant disclosures and transactions appear to be in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles for all three of the audits, and all supplementary information is appropriate in relation to the financial statements, and the reporting is consistently applied. We did obtain signed representation letters from management prior to finalizing the audit reports, which we're discussing this morning. You can advance to the next slide. We're happy to note that there were no difficulties, issues, disagreements, or findings related to any of the audits. And lastly, there were no corrections or uncorrected items noted related to the audits. So the numbers we started with are essentially the numbers we ended with, meaning that management and staff properly accounted for the activity of all three plans and the financial statements provided to us. You can advance to the next slide. Okay, so now we'll get to the high-level results of the audits. So again, our job is to give an opinion on the financial statements, as well as providing you any findings related to internal controls. So regarding the audit opinions, we are issuing what is called unmodified opinions on all three of the benefit plans. An unmodified opinion is referred to as a clean opinion in layman's terms. So that's the best possible outcome of a financial statement audit, and that's what you received on all three of the audits. So again, the best possible outcome. Regarding internal controls, we would communicate any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies that we become aware of when we're performing audit procedures. Here on this slide, we describe what a material weakness is. And if you advance to the next slide, we describe what a significant deficiency is. So we have no findings to report. There were no material weaknesses or significant deficiencies identified on any of the three audits. So like the audit opinions, this is the best possible outcome. Since there were no weaknesses identified, there were no separate letters prepared in the plans related to internal controls. You can advance to the next slide. So those are the things that we wanted to discuss with you this morning. Our contact information is there if any of you need to follow up with us on anything. But Stacy and I are happy to respond to any questions or comments that you might have.
Are there any questions from any of the trustees? Jock, I don't see any questions from this side. So thank you and Stacy for your time this morning and for the presentation on the audit findings. Thank you. So I guess the last matter, I think the audit reports just need to be approved. Is that the case? I don't think, Marion, we don't usually have a formal approval process. No, if we had questions or disagreements, we would note and discuss those, but we do not have a formal. Okay. So they consider them accepted. All right, thank you. All right, well, we'll let you go on with your meeting. Again, we appreciate working with y'all, and we appreciate management and staff working with us and getting information to us timely and obviously in great shape. And it was a pleasure working with you again this year. Thank you. Thank you, Jack. And then I just want to point out that the financial statements is a significant undertaking. It's a lot of work, primarily by Marion's group, his accountants, and to go through 3 plans. I know every year they look at it fresh. We try to present it better than we have in years past, and so they've done a ton of work and really should be commended for putting together some good reports and getting a clean opinion again. So thanks to the accounting group for the effort put in there. Next item, internal audit has a couple of reports to present. So Todd Loretta from my staff will be presenting with Bill Gogol from Brown Smith Wallace, our internal auditor. Anybody besides Bill?
No, just Bill. Just Bill.
Okay, Todd and Bill. Thanks.
Let's see if you guys can hear me. Here we go. So as Tim mentioned, we have 2 reports to present. They're both IT related, and they're both related to network security, so they're connected. They're kind of from one overall area. I'm going to go over the basics. If you have any really technical question or anything to be explained further, I'm going to defer to Bill. This is one of our more technical areas, so don't hesitate with any questions. We'll try to answer your questions best we can, so please speak up if you need to ask a question. With that, let's move on to slide 2. Just give a little overview of the 2 engagements. So we are taking the approach that we're going to do annual social engineering assessments, which is phishing testing. and attack and penetration engagements. We're going to do those every year. I don't think I mentioned that at the last month, the audit plan meeting. We decided to do annual social assessments as well, along with the attack and penetration. I think it's going to be a best practice. I think it's in our best interest to do that. So these two types of engagements are really addressing two different factors in network security. The social engineering assessment is really focused on behavior. I mean, it's really focused on employees' reaction to how they react to phishing attacks and so forth, and their awareness. Now, the check and penetration audit is really focused on system controls and the actual system setup. So there are two different things, but you need both in order to have a good network security. I mean, if you have employees clicking on links left and right and downloading malicious software into our system, our malicious code, you're going to have all kinds of problems. You can have the greatest network controls in place, but that's not going to work. So it's really important to have both areas covered well. So moving on to page 2. This particular, so let's talk about the phishing testing. This particular social engineering engagement is the second in the past 4 years. We did a similar engagement in 2018. The scope of the engagement covered all the email addresses for all the employees that existed at the time, which would be 985 employees. We did the testing in May of 2021. It took a week to do the testing. If we move on to slide 3. The overall objectives of the engagement, which would test the behavior of the district employees, when faced with this phishing attacks. And then if it didn't react properly, we let them know. We took them to a page and let them know they got phished. Try to help maybe with the education process and kind of spread the word. Another objective was to quantify that behavior with some hard number of metrics so we could pass that along to the IT management, give them a good idea where things stand with this area, and let them know if they need to take any additional steps in this area. We did also want to assess the overall efforts to make district employees aware of the dangers of email phishing attacks. Any questions there? So let's move on.
Real quick.
Sure, go ahead.
You said in the overview, we've done this, the second engagement in the past 4 years.
Yeah.
But you're recommending we do it annually?
Yes, we're going to do it annually, yes. Yeah, I think it doesn't require us a lot of work, but I think the payoff is really large. So yeah. I think it's a really good idea. Let's see. I'm sorry. Moving on to page 4. As far as the methodology, how did we do this engagement? We sent emails to all 985 employees. We sent each employee received 3 emails. So we used 44 different templates. So approximately 3,000 emails were sent out during that week. We used real-world phishing tactics. We spoofed versions of email addresses, websites, attachment landing pages. So we tried to fool them into thinking this was from a legitimate source, and tried to get them to click on something or provide more information. I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit, but on page 5, so using the techniques, we try to induce the employees to click on the file in the email. Now at this point, this is where a real-life hacker will a lot of times would download malicious code into the system when you click on that file. At that point, you're kind of cooked. So we're trying to, get across the message to employees. We shouldn't click on anything. We don't know where it's coming from. We also try to get them to provide sensitive information, such as credentials. Sometimes, some cases, we took them to a landing page and requested more information. Not always, depending on what kind of email it was. So we also tracked and analyzed and summarized the results of all the testing. And I'll show you those results in here in a little bit. And one thing you want to keep in mind is that our phishing emails were explicitly allowed through the system. The spam filters, we're not catching any emails. So because the test was here around behavior, not system controls. So in real life, the spam filter might have caused some of these. I guess that's my point here. On page 6, the team performing the testing had the following certifications. You can see they're very well qualified. certified in system security. They're penetration testers. They're certified ethical hackers. So they do a lot of this kind of testing. And you'll see the same thing on the next audit. If you go on to page 7, the overall testing results, the results were very, very good. For this engagement, we have only 11 employees click on a suspicious link, which is less than 1%. That's great. No employee submitted any kind of credentials or any information. We're not able to induce anybody to do anything like that. So in comparison to 2018, you can see the numbers there. They were not very good in 2018. We had 384 employees click on the link. We also had 139 employees submit additional information. So if you look on to page 8, there's some pie charts that really help you see that. You can see employees phished on the left, employees submitted credentials on the right. The pie charts from this year are all green, which is good. 2018, you see a lot of red. Basically, almost more than 1 in 3 employees clicked on a suspicious link in 2018. So there's been a lot of improvement since then. And IT has done a lot of work. They've done a really good job of promoting the idea of not paying attention to where the emails are coming from. Don't click anything you don't understand, we don't know who it's from. They've done a lot of good education. If you look on page 9, you can see there's a copy of our email ribbon. You can see they've rolled out the No-Be4 software. That's an email phishing software. So the idea is when we see anything we don't know what it is, it's suspicious, we click on that and it takes the email to IT and they take a look at it and see what's going on. And they also promote the idea, don't click on anything you don't know what it is. They have signage all over their buildings, different sites. So they've done a good job of promoting this idea. And I think, and also I should say, I think we all, over the last few years, everyone has become aware of this general problem in general. So that's been part of it too. But they've done a really good job in promoting this idea. So I think that's why we saw such improvement. Any questions there? So on page 10, the overall assessment, we got a satisfactory opinion. That's a clean opinion, just like Jock just mentioned. That's a clean opinion in layman's term. So no issues were identified, no recommendation was issued. Any questions on this first engagement? This is the first one. Okay, so then we'll move on to page 11 and go over the second engagement, which is the attack and penetration engagement, which I mentioned earlier, focuses on the actual system controls. There's no social engineering involved here. So this is the third attack and penetration audit we've done in the past 4 years. We did engagements in 2018. We did one last year in 2020. I guess about the same time frame. It was August. A lot of you weren't here for that, but some of you were. So we're scheduled to do another one in the spring or summer of 2022. So the scope of this engagement consisted of an internal and external attack penetration tests on the district managed system. So there's 13 external websites, 3 external networks, and 3 internal networks. We include all externally facing systems, or anything facing the internet. Testing was performed during portions of April 2021. Moving on to page 12, slide 12. So the overall objectives of the engagement were to identify any potential system vulnerabilities related to unauthorized access to our sensitive data, which, anything around their employees, Social Security numbers, bank accounts, supplier vendors, customers, and then also our critical control systems, our operation systems, the systems that control our plants, the systems that control our pump stations. We definitely need to protect those very, very, very closely. The DCS, you can see DCS is what controls the plants. The SCADA systems actually control the pump stations. We're on page 13. As far as objectives, we focus on 2 main areas. Again, external penetration testing. The objective there was to assess whether the district network security systems and network perimeter are sufficiently protecting the district systems from external sources. Now, the internal penetration testing, the goal here was to determine assess whether district systems are vulnerable to sources already inside the network. So that could be somebody who broke into the system, that could be somebody who already exists in the system. Now, we took the approach when we did our internal testing, we used what they call the breach model, in that we had broken in, so we had no logon credentials when we started. And I'll talk more about that when we get through this. Page 14. This will give you a more of a visual of what we're trying to do, get a picture in your head, so to speak. This is a picture of the network at a very high level. It's not every detail, just kind of gives you the basics. So here to the right-hand box at the top there, objectives for our external testing, we're trying to get from the internet and obtain access to the business network and get into the internal network, which basically we're trying to move from the internet into the blue circle in the middle there. We're trying to get through all the firewalls and all the controls and break through, the prevention techniques of the network and try to get into the data, and then basically escalate privileges and gain access to private data. And if we're really successful, we would try to move from there all the way to the left to the purple circle, which is where the operation systems are. So we tried to do that as well. That was one of the goals anyway. Now, for the internal testing, the box at the top left, we are starting within the blue circle. We're already in there. So the idea there is to escalate our privileges and gain access to any private data, keep moving around, move laterally, gain more power, and then also I'll try to get over to that purple circle, which is the operation system. So those are objectives in kind of a picture form. Any questions? On page 15, as far as approach and methodology, so we did use attack methods that modeled the techniques that a hacker would use in the real world. All the testing was, done from, as I mentioned, an unauthenticated perspective. In other words, we had no logon credentials. We were basically just plugged into the system for our internal testing. We had a laptop plugged in, started from scratch. But there was no social engineering involved in this engagement. As I mentioned, we did that in the other engagement. Now, as to where to attack, just like we did with most things, it was risk-based. So the team figured out where the most risk was, and that's where they attacked. We didn't check every part of the network. The testers did have complete information regarding the systems and the architecture. There were no changes to security controls to facilitate our testing, but we did not make any effort to conceal the testing activities as well. So, any questions there? Page 16, again, another picture to help you get a simpler view of this. So for external testing, just think of the network as a house. We're kind of across the street, and we're going to try to break into this house. Get anywhere we can. We get in the house, and we want to move from room to room and get access to as many rooms and get to the main floor and find where the assets are in the house. And that's what we're trying to do for externally. Now, internally, we're already in the house, we're locked in the room with no keys. We don't have nothing, we're just locked in the room with nothing. So we're trying to get out of that room and move around the house and gain access to as many things as we can. That's a good way, I think, explain it in a picture. So any questions there? Page 17, again, all testing was performed remotely at the Brown Smith Wall Security Lab. We use the standards that you see there. Certifications of the team, basically the same ones I showed you earlier. I think the Security Plus certified is additional one for this. We had additional personnel had even more certifications that we added, that are added there. So let's move on to page 18. We go over the results. So this went really well. We saw a lot of improvement from last, a lot of improvement. So let's revisit that picture that I just showed you a few slides ago. So to the right, you look at the external testing. We were not able to break into the network. We had no success in breaking into the network. The one thing we were able to do, there is a system or application out on our website called Taxable, where you actually you apply for credentials out at the website, and we applied for credentials under the AR tab. And we received credentials when we probably shouldn't have. It's not a big deal because most of that information is public information anyway, but there's something minor that we need to probably tighten up, and I'll explain a little bit more about that. But that was the only success that we had, which is very, very minor. So we did not break into the system. Now, to the far left, you see the purple circle. We were not able to get into the operation system through the external audit internal testing, either one. So that's really good news as well. Now, on the internal testing there in the middle, we did know a few vulnerabilities in certain systems, but we were not successful in leveraging those vulnerabilities at all. We did not, not able to obtain additional access, privileges, or anything to do with it, but there are some vulnerabilities that need to be tightened up. We did obtain some access to some old directories, which is some non-current information, some old checks, customer checks going back 2013. So that was probably the most significant thing we found as far as the scene data. So any questions there?
I have a question.
Sure.
I remember when you did this same report last time, and I do recall it being not nearly as successful as it was this time. Can you just compare, like last time, if you recall, like last time externally, were you able to break into the network?
We were, yes, we were, I'm sorry. Yes, we broke in and we got in and started moving around and escalated privileges, and we saw a lot of private data. So we got to bank account numbers and social security numbers. We got deep into it. So, yeah.
So what do you attribute the success of this to?
Well, they've made a lot of improvements to, let me Bill answer this. Bill, are you there?
Yeah, Todd, I'm here. The biggest factor last test that allowed us in, I think we came in through the Oracle EBS application, and the root cause of that was that system was behind on patching. So since then, the IT group has been more intentional and disciplined about installing system patches, which is one of the greatest defenses you can have to prevent things like this.
So with those controls now in place, is that something that will protect us forever? Or, I mean, I assume you have...
It's, patching is a process. It's a maintenance process. So basically, it's, new patches come out every day. So they just got to keep up with the patching process. So.
Thank you.
Jenny, is there anything you want to add to that? Jenny's our Assistant Director of IT. So I know she's been involved in helping make sure that these...
Thank you.
So she'll have a report later.
Yeah. And that patching process is something that just, it's really, you really have to work to keep up with it. So there's always something new, as she mentioned, so. Okay. So as far as, we're still on page 19, slide 19. So the overall assessment for external, we have a satisfactory opinion, a clean opinion. So again, a great deal of improvement. I think I already said this. So we have the one item with the onboarding process for the title court application. Now, in internal, we have a generally satisfactory opinion. Again, we saw lots of improvement here, but there's still maybe a few items to still work on. And the one item preventing us from having a clean opinion is the item one there, the vulnerabilities to blue keep and internal blue exploits. Now, that does involve some patching, so there's a couple of things they missed on the patching process. It's hard, we really got to lock down the patching process. So there's a couple items that we did find on the internal side. So we'll talk about that. If you go on to page 20, the one item, this is the external, this is one item that I mentioned about the title court application system. So basically, as I mentioned, it's a system that's out on our website, and it's out there to facilitate, when houses are going to be sold or transferred. Title companies use it, are the biggest user. They apply for credentials, and they use it to get, to obtain the dollar amount that's owed to the district you know, on that property, so they can close it, go through, the title process and sell the property. So it's a big help to us as the district. It's a good way for us to collect money, so it's good to have it out there. So what we did, if you go to page 21, you can see a picture of the actual registration page out there on the website. So we went on under MSD and AR, and applied for credentials. Obviously, we're not part of MSD AR, and we received credentials. Basically, that submission is submitted to a human, you know, an employee in AR, and they approve it. So it was a human error or a process error. It's not a system error. So again, a lot of this information is public. It's not a huge deal, but I think it's something you need to tighten up as far as the process there. If you move to page 22, so we're recommending that either they add some additional approvals or maybe a system control, which they're going to do. And I should mention all recommendations IT is on board with. They're already in process of taking care of a lot of these items, and if they have not finished them. Any questions on that one? Again, pretty minor item there. If you move to page 23, this is the item, the vulnerabilities to the blue keep and internal blue exploits. Again, this is the patching issue. We did see a couple of items that need to be patched. There are three hosts on the network that were vulnerable to these exploits called Eternal Blue and Blue Keep. Both of these items are vulnerabilities in the Windows systems. So both require patches provided by Microsoft. So Microsoft's pretty good about putting the patches, as soon as they identify, they put the patches out there for download. So two of the hosts were vulnerable to both exploits. One of the hosts was vulnerable only to the Blue Keep. So we were able to initiate attacks on each of these three system hosts. If we move on to page 24, so the question is, were we able to get anywhere with our attack efforts? And the answer is no. And, well, why? So one of the hosts was not connected to the corporate domain. Just think of using my house analogy. This host was like in a room down in the basement, so to speak. So it was a long way from the main floor where the data was. It was isolated from the rest of the network. There's a lot of security between that host and the corporate domain. To add another wrinkle to this host and system is maintained by a third-party service provider. The third party that maintains our security systems, you know, our CCTV, cameras, the video surveillance, security cards, basically our security system. So they're responsible for maintaining this system and this machine. So there's going to require some coordination with IT and this vendor to make sure this doesn't happen again. Now regarding the other two hosts, the district's endpoint security was able to prevent us from, so that those hosts were actually in the corporate domain or on the main floor of the house. But security prevented us from getting any further. It's as if we were in rooms and security guards caught us, so to speak. Security was good, but they have set up. We'll skip over to 26. I'm not going to get into the details of that. So our recommendation is, obviously we want to install those Windows updates to these systems. Also, look into the patching process and correcting deficiencies that may exist there. We just want to really make sure that process is rock solid. And in regards to the security system, you need to coordinate with that vendor to make sure they're patching like they're supposed to, because it is our machine, it's our system, it's on our network. So you need to really make sure that vendor is on top of that and coordinate with them. Any questions on that? Item 3 on page 27. Item 3 and 4 are connected. They both involve older systems or legacy systems. Item 3 has to do with segmentation. Now, this is something that we wrote up in the last audit, but this is, as I understand, I don't know how to do the work, but it's something that takes a while to really address. Because if you do it too fast, you're going to screw up production. You're going to screw up the systems as they're operating today. You got to take it one piece at a time and take your time with the segmentation. So it's not something that's easily addressed. It's a very time-consuming effort. So we've made a lot of improvements in this area, but some of the older, as I said, legacy systems need some more segmentation. Basically what that means, you want to divide everything up. Going back to my house analogy, you want to have the systems and machines and subnets in different rooms with doors and walls in between there, so separating everything. So it makes it harder for a attacker to move around the house, so to speak. You don't want them to wander and go from room to room with nothing to stop them. So our recommendation, page 28, is to have management continue their efforts. They've made a lot of progress, but just have to keep and follow through with it and continue to work on the segmentation. And so for some of those older systems, if we don't need them anymore, we just turn them off. Just board up that room and just block it off. Let's just get rid of it. Because what can happen is that system's still running and they go into that room, so to speak, go up your door on another side of that room and it leads to another system. So we want to prevent that from happening. That's the other part of that. Any questions? 4, file directories. Again, this is related. These are old file directories that can probably be addressed through segmentation. We were able to access these old directories. There was no authentication or permissions required. In other words, we just opened the door and walked right in. There was nothing to stop us. We did try to leverage access to these locations. Again, try to get our backdoor into another system, but it didn't work. Again, these directories are not part of the corporate domain, kind of like the same issue in item 2. We did see some older customer checks, as I mentioned, and that was probably the most sensitive thing we saw in there. They went back to 2013. We were not really able to do anything with this, with our access to these directories. They're just old information. So recommendation at page 30. Either if we're not using these directories, let's just turn them off, or let's improve the segmentation around them and just improve the security around them. So in summary, I guess the one I'm going to say, we saw a lot of improvement here overall. I think the one thing we just got to really make sure that patching process is rock solid, and then just continue efforts to improve the segmentation. So overall, I think what we have is a real good report. So any questions from anybody?
Yeah, so is the attack and penetration testing, is that going to happen annually as well?
Yes, it
Okay.
is. Yes.
I have a question.
Sure.
And I apologize before I start because it's kind of bouncing around and I'm not sure I can verbalize the issue that I think I see.
Okay. I'll probably let Bill answer this, but go ahead.
First, it looks like you've got a really competent audit that went on. But we're looking at attacks and vulnerabilities, and you'll discover them during the audit process. That's what you will assess and discover potential holes in the system.
Right.
Is there anything that monitors any process or systems component that kind of watches to see that we're not being attacked during normal operation?
Yeah, I think the answer is yes, and I'll probably let Jeannie answer that.
I moved.
I'm sorry.
Yes, we actually have multiple tools that do that for us. We have some things that run monthly, but we have things that run real time on the endpoints of the district.
Because someone said something about the patching of your Oracle, the DBMS that patched
Yes.
in the previous audit.
Right.
That the patching was not done timely, I guess.
Right.
And my concern there would be, even if the patches come out and apply timely, it means that there was a vulnerability that they were protecting or correcting. And is the real-time monitoring of operations, is that where they would normally find the need to patch problems that would require patching? Because when I look at, I'm taking this to what I know now, or what I know about now, and that's virus protection. Almost every time you run a standalone virus scan on a PC, it goes out and checks to make sure you got the latest virus definition.
Mhm.
But you've got to run that standalone scan to make sure you haven't been infected
Right.
before you found out that you were sick, so to speak. Before.
Right.
So, I mean, and that's what I'm looking, it's great to find this out so it can't happen in the future, but if it has happened in the past, do we know the impact of it? If your data got corrupted, operational data was corrupt, you fix it so they can't do it again, but do you know if it happened first time?
Yeah, well, when we did the testing, the last audit for that Oracle issue, we did look to see if there was any intrusion. So we were able to determine there wasn't. It was not, it was not exploited from our testing.
Right.
So again, they have systems that, oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Did you hear what I said? I'm sorry, Adam.
I heard most of it.
Okay.
So I can answer that a little further. I hear what you're saying there. It's a matter of ensuring that that real time occurs, but also auditing it.
Right.
So we
Right,
have
that's-
some dedicated staff now
Gotcha.
that on a daily basis, if the system didn't get scanned, we'll discover why, and then go after it and actually get that system scanned and then the updates to occur. So very proactive.
And do we have some operational interaction to go and make sure that no significant damage has been done or try to correct what might have been done?
Yes, we have, and as you'll see, as I go through my presentation, we've matured the
If you're
security.
going to get to it, then I won't.
Yeah,
Sure.
we have measures in place that are allowing us to detect suspicious behavior and vulnerabilities as they occur, not waiting for an audit to get to your point.
Matter of fact, they detect when the auditors go into the system.
Correct.
And then
That's
they,
what they're really that's some of what you're testing is whether those
whether they catch
measures
it,
are,
right.
are adequate.
Yeah, I just one thing I would tell you, when we did our testing, there was some communication going back and forth, and they would say, we see you doing this, we see you doing that. So they could see some of the things we're doing, so they were watching. So that helps answer.
Very good. Thank you.
All right, sure. Any other questions from anybody?
I don't have a question. I just want to congratulate you all. I mean, I think that we oftentimes get these, reports of satisfactory or clean opinions. And, everything's good, everything's buttoned up. And I recall this one being one that there looked like there was a lot of opportunities for improvement, and it seems that you've really, seized upon those and learned a lot of lessons from last time.
Yeah, well, they deserve the credit, not me. We just, so.
And I would pass that on to the people of the district, the security awareness that we've done, our support from our leaders, our management, our executive director, our directors, that take security seriously and support us. Every time we put in a new control, in 10 minutes, your session's going to sign out. They're like, well, that's a bother, but we understand it.
Mm-hmm.
We understand why you're doing it. So it's a district-wide, I think, that would have been able to make that improvement.
Well, it's a job well done. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, Bill, thank you for your time. Thanks for your help.
Thank you for having me.
All right, then with that, we will let Jenny get to her.
So Jenny, before Jenny gets started, so for those of you who are somewhat new to this, there's 3 areas, now there's 3, that we will give you a semi-annual report on. And so this is the first one of the fall one. So we do one on IT, that's what Jenny's gonna do today. Then a month from now, we'll do an operations update, environmental update as to where we are. And then the month after that, we'll do diversity. So you'll find that every 6 months, we'll do those 3, and then you'll see them again in the spring and then back in the fall. So the first one we're doing is IT. Jenny's here to give that. And so, Jenny, have at it.
Thank you, Brian. So good morning. It's a pleasure to be here to give you an update about our security program. You will find this presentation, it's on your laptops under the second tab. So you don't have a paper copy, and I'm also displaying it on screen if you want to take a look at it there.
What's this one?
So I want to give you an idea of where the security program is for the district. Really looking in 3 areas. One, let's talk about the current security trends, things that you've probably heard in the news, and help kind of bring context of what you've heard in the news and how that impacts MSD. Secondly, I want to walk you through the maturity of our security program, where we've been. As you can see from the audit results, we've had some, and even the phishing exercises, not so good results, but now we're at a place where the results are really good. We want to show you what we've done in the past years to get there. And then finally, we have a tool that allows us to show you a security rating. This would be similar to a credit report that you might have for yourself. And we're able to then take our security rating and compare it against some of our peer wastewater and stormwater districts across the country and kind of see where we rank. So those are really the three areas of the update. And please feel free to interject at any time with questions. I've tried not to lay in too much jargon, but it's difficult when you're in IT to do that. But please ask me to clarify if needed. So first, let's look at the current cyber security threats for enterprises. There's really 5 that are present right now that are, and these are the top 5. The first is social engineering. That is the number one reason for data breaches and for ransomware attacks. And it's really because it looks innocent, it's innocuous, an email comes in, I click on it, I think it looks like something legit, and says, give me your login and your password, and I do it, and then you give away credentials. That's really a big factor, and we've done some things to thwart that, to address that directly. And number 2 is ransomware. This is really where the cyber criminals break into our network, break into a network, and they then exfiltrate, take data out of that network, and then they encrypt it, meaning you can't read it anymore, and then they ask for a ransom, a monetary ransom. I'm sure you've heard about those in the news recently. And the final 3, DDoS attacks. That's where you throw enough traffic at a website that it breaks. Third-party software. You probably heard about SolarWinds earlier this year. That's a tool we use to monitor. That's a tool many people use to monitor their network. So by getting into a third-party tool, they were able to get into many more enterprises at once. Instead of just a targeted attack for one enterprise, they could get into many by using that third-party tool as their entrance point. And then finally, cloud computing vulnerabilities. If you think about cloud technologies, that means you're through the internet, you're at a data center with many other companies. So again, the cyber criminals can get to many companies at one time by looking at a cloud-based infrastructure. Office 365 is one of those. Many companies, and we have 2, have gone to Office 365. That means that our Office products, Word, Excel, are not in our data center anymore. They're through the internet in the data centers, Microsoft's data center, essentially. And so many companies are dependent upon that. Recently, there was a print spooler vulnerability you may have heard about in the news, where that was a vulnerability that allowed for system access in the Microsoft cloud. Questions there as far as threats? Sound familiar? Okay. So here, ransomware in the news. You more than likely heard about JBS. That was the meat manufacturer. That was a ransomware attack. Interesting thing about that attack is that they got into the systems in January and February and March of that year and tested things, looked for vulnerabilities, things that Todd had spoken about, to see where they could get into their systems. They did get into their systems. They did get their employees' credentials. And then months later, in May and June, they were able to, they took all their sensitive data and said, okay, we have your data, pay us the ransom, and then encrypted their files so their systems didn't work. They paid out $11 million to get back to operations. And then certainly you've heard about the Colonial Pipeline attack, very similar situation with ransomware. So infiltrate the system, take data out, and then encrypt the system so it's not usable. there are things we can do to address that, and we'll get to those as we walk through this presentation. So the question is, what's driving this activity? Why is it so prevalent right now? There's a couple factors there. There's something called the dark web. Don't know if you've heard of it, but it is where the cyber criminals can actually, they're advertising, here's some code you can use to hack into a system. They're selling it. So you don't have to be the guy in the basement with all the knowledge and all the tricks to try to get into it. You can buy it. You can buy the software, you can buy the tools to get into systems, and you can also buy people's credentials. You probably have heard of the data breaches where your bank got had a data breach, and now your social security number, your PII information is out there. That's also sold on the dark web. It's real. It's not just an ominous thing. It's real, and it's going on. Secondly, with the rise of Bitcoin can't be tracked. It's not like you can go to a bank and say, well, that account belongs to X. Bitcoin is a way to anonymously transfer money. So that's a second factor for that. And the other thing is businesses are really dependent on digital infrastructure. We've gotten to that point in the evolution of technology. So a little bit of what's going on, what's in the news, what's driving the activity. So let's talk a little bit about how does that relate into context of MSD? Where do we stand with everything that's going on? So I pulled up this pie chart for you to see, and if you look at the very top pie piece that says utilities, that's where we would fall into. It's 3.1% of ransomware attacks are so that's good. If you look at we're not in the biggest pieces of the pie, right? If you look at professional services, those are the ransomware attacks that occurred with the SolarWinds, and there's been some other ones, Kaseya, that have been in the news, and those are again tools that we're using to monitor the network that can be that have ransomware or malware placed in them. Healthcare is a big one, and here's the public sector. So we do fall in that too because we are a government entity. In some ways, we're a little different though, because if you think about some of the larger ransomware attacks, I think Baltimore was one that was in 2018, and it was a multi-million-dollar thing for them to get out of. All of their city and utilities are under one domain. We actually have a separate domain from the city of St. Louis, so we have some separation there, I guess. So if we look at again, trying to put it in context of MSD, where are we in the as far as targets? Government ransomware attacks, these are trends from 2019 and 2020. You can see a lot of activity in the June, July, August area. I think that's where it was just ramping up in that year, and then it tailed off in October, November, and December. Have a little note here that 53% of the attacks for state governments are targeted towards cities and local schools. We don't yet have the 2021 ransomware attacks, but if you just look at this graph, we're looking at anywhere from 10 to somewhere around 25 per month. So it's happening and it's rampant. And yes, we are susceptible to it. But I think as I show you what we've done to develop our program, we're putting the right things in place to keep us off that target. And then finally, this is a look at the ransomware attacks based upon states. Sorry, the graph's a little blurry, but if you look at some of the bigger bars, California, you'll notice way up there. You'll see Texas way up there. New York is in here, right there. And there we are, Missouri. So that might give us, a little bit of, not comfort, but thought that, okay, we're not as far as a state being in the attack vector. So, any questions there? This really just kind of get your attention. This is what's going on in the, as far as current trends and where MSD sits there. Now I want to talk to you about our security program and our strategy and how we've matured it through the last 3 years. First of all, as far as our strategy, we take a risk-based approach, meaning we look at the things that might impact the district critical business processes. And there's really three lines of defense that we use. One is the standards and frameworks for managing IT and security. We take the frameworks that are best practices, standards that other companies are following, that other industries are following, and we're implementing those. Those are disciplined processes, they're disciplined controls, and they're also disciplined tools, things like proactive vulnerability detection. So we're following those best practices, those standards, to ensure that we are fighting the threats as best that we can. The second piece there is to actually then proactively employ those things. It's one thing to have the policies, and quite another thing to do it. So we've spent a lot of time implementing the processes so that we can be proactive. We talked about patching earlier. So after the audit last year, and we had that infiltration due to the penetration test, we put together a policy, and our policy now is N-1, which means application, operating system, third party, we will tolerate -1 patch level. So we're as high as we can from a patch perspective, and we expect compliance across the department in both the application and the operating side. It was a big step. Previously, you put the patches in it was known that there's a problem, but the best thing we can do, and that we decided as management, as leadership of IT, is to be in this space where it's N-1. We're going to put in the most current patches. The reason it's -1 is sometimes they release patches that are vulnerable, and they release patches that are buggy. So we don't want to disrupt business operations by being too far ahead of the curve. We're going to do it to N-1 so that we're as protected as we can be. And then the third line of defense is audit and risk assessments. So what internal audit does for us is very, very valuable. That's really truth in the pudding. That they can come in and you can see the results from a 2018 assessment to a 2021 assessment. And we want to continue to do that, and we welcome that and value that partnership, but that's really helpful. We also have other companies that will do risk assessments for us, and we do that frequently to come in and say, help us look at our risk, because you don't know what you don't know. And so we have firms that may know a little better, have an objective view to come in and help us understand where we might have gaps and what we need to do. And as a note there was a risk assessment that we partnered with operations last year for the industrial control systems. You'll see it referenced as SCADA for the pump stations and DCS, distributed control systems for the plants. There was a risk assessment conducted last year, IT and the pump station team, and we worked together to understand what risk may or may not be there, and at that time there was nothing significant. So let's talk about what we've done, and this to give you an idea of our journey of sorts. So in 2018, we began with securing a position for a CISO, that's a Certified Information Security, or Chief Information Security Officer. Those are expensive people. They're typically a large organization will have a 20-deep security team. We're a smaller organization. For us, this was a great move to have we share it with Bi-State, we share it with Regis, it's a person, to help advise us on our security program. It's a very good arrangement. We also put disaster recovery in our strategic business operating plan. And the reason that is so important is if you think about ransomware and that we could be locked out of all of our systems, if we have a disaster recovery plan and a site, we can come up in half a day. we can recover from it, don't have to pay the ransom no matter what they did, as long as we engineer and design that appropriately. So that was put into the district's strategic business operating plan in 2018. That was also our first internal audit for penetration testing. And we conducted several risk assessments to help us identify the gaps so that we could focus on the high-risk areas. So if we move from 2018 through 2019, this is where we took and modified the MSD pay plan. We worked with HR to get positions that were dedicated to cybersecurity. Prior to that, we didn't have that. We did not have a cybersecurity team. In that year, in 2019, we hired those people, we formed that team, and then we developed something called a Security Operations Center, and that's really where you have your tools and you can monitor the activity that's going on as far as vulnerabilities in the district and have those dedicated resources 100% of the time. That's their job, to look for security issues, vulnerabilities, systems that might have been infected with malware or phishing emails. And the other thing we did was establish a vulnerability management goal. Prior to that, we had monthly reports on our vulnerabilities, and each technology owner in IT would get that, but what we did was say, we're going to go and look at the severity levels 4s and 5s, which are your highest risk items, and we're going to actively reduce those. We want our trends to go down. Vulnerabilities aren't always a patch, and sometimes they do break the application, but they could be configurations too on the systems that allow access in. So that there's some complexity there, but we formalized it so that all of IT understood that vulnerability management is top priority, and that we were going to address that head on. So going into 2020, we added the Technology Security Risk Program to the Strategic Business Operating Plan. So that's important enough that as a district, we should be developing this program. Our IT policies, they were there, but they need to be updated because technology changes quickly, just as you can see from the threats and trends that we talked about. It's ever evolving. What we thought was good enough, a year ago is certainly not good enough today. So we've updated our policies to ensure that we're following the best standards and we're enforcing the best practices. We also added some new policies that we didn't have before. Patch, vulnerability management. A really important one is remote access, because that's another vulnerability, that's another foothold that an attacker could get, because to allow our people to work from home remotely, you have to allow access into the network. So that's a point where a hacker or cyber criminal could get into the network. We have a policy around that, what you can and can't do, how you can access it. We tighten controls around it. And then we implemented a phishing campaign, a tool to do phishing campaigns. So you saw the results from the audit, but we wanted it to be a common practice for the district so that they're exercising it. Just like you would exercise for a sport or a game, you exercise to combat phishing. We have a tool internally that goes out to the people of the employees of the district so that they can practice it. If they click on something they shouldn't have, it comes up and says, hey, sorry, but this was a phishing email, it was a test. Please check out this link for more information to help educate them so they're not susceptible to phishing emails. And then a significant, on top of that, a significant effort was our security awareness campaign. You can't say enough about this because you can do all the technology layers of defense, but it is the people and the infiltration comes from those phishing emails or the social engineering that happens. As soon as they can get someone's credentials, they can get into the systems. So the security awareness campaign is about, we have posters around the district. We have a security blog. We ask that everyone read the policies, acknowledge the policies annually. I think that helps a lot, and it is the results of the audit phishing campaign is really a tribute to the employees of the district for reading those, understanding it, and then really practicing good security practices. So that takes us through 2020. In 2021, we implemented something called multi-factor authentication. You're more than likely familiar with that. Every bank app that you go to, you need to have your phone so that you have a second item that authenticates that it's really you, or some keywords. Multi-factor is some of the metrics say it's 99.9% prevents security breaches. So we implemented that for our remote access. We implemented that for our administrative systems, and in particular, our backup systems. One of the things that cyber criminals do is go after your backups, because then you can't recover. If they take your backups and encrypt those as well, you have no ability to recover. So we've taken those systems, and there's multi-factor applied to those. So even if they did get our admin's login and password, they still cannot get into that system because they don't have that second piece of authentication. We also are practicing a continuous phishing campaign, meaning every quarter we are sending phishing emails out to the district to help them practice, again, securities practices. We may have an annual phishing campaign from Audit, but internally, we're constantly keeping people alert to ensure that they don't fall prey to it. And then I talked a little bit about the disaster recovery site. Early on, we put it in the strategic business operating plan. We've actually implemented it. This is very significant. This is really big to be able to recover from a ransomware attack, to have that site. It's up, it's alive, it's breathing. And we are about to do some exercises, some annual exercises. And that is a tenet of good security, to have a disaster recovery plan. So where are we going? We're adding additional staff to IT. So we have 2 on our team. We're going to add a 3rd member of the IT staff. Sorry. And we've just added, and tribute to Brent and his team for adding one of the members of our security team is now in operations. So when we talk about the SCADA and the DCS networks, there is a security professional now in the operations doing the same things, making sure they're patching, making sure they have their defenses in place and firewalls, et cetera. We're looking to add artificial intelligence in threat detection. And all that means is there are tools that allow you to detect. First, it understands what your usual user behavior is, and then it's the technology is able to detect what is suspicious. Like suddenly, there's a lot of access going on to a specific share, specific application that isn't typical. So that will help us and alert us to possible risk and threats. And the next thing that we're working on is a multi-pronged backup strategy. The reason for that is it's important that you have not only your backups, which we do, but that you have a disaster recovery site, which we now have. But then we're looking at another form of a backup to restore our systems from, and that could be in cloud storage, cloud backup, but to have multiple ways to recover so that you can actually, because we don't know what the next threats are going to be as they evolve. So the thought there is to have multiple ways, plan A, plan B, and plan C, so that we can recover and then have systems restored here for the district. And then you heard Todd talk about the network segmentation. And as he said, it's complex. It can add a lot of layers of complexity to the network, but we're working on that, and we are going to make significant steps in this next fiscal year in that area. Any questions? That's a lot of information. Just try to give you an idea of where we've been, what the journey's been, and how we've gotten from audit results that were not so great to better. So the final portion of my presentation is our security rating versus our peers. we have an application that's called BitSite, and it gives cybersecurity ratings for companies. Talked about this a little earlier. It's kind of like a credit rating, and I'm not going to go through all of this detail, but it really takes a look at your external view of all your systems, and it has like 3 components to it. User behavior is how susceptible your people are to phishing. Your diligence, what are you doing diligently? These are our actual grades. I redacted a few because I don't want to share that publicly. But it looks at these kind of steps to reduce the impact of and the risk of a security vulnerability. And then it looks at compromised systems, whether or not they can see that our systems have been compromised. So that's what the rating consists of. So what is our rating? Currently, we sit at a rating of 770. On a scale, just to give you an idea of where we are, there's the basic rating from 250 to 640. If you're intermediate, 640 to 740. And if you're advanced, it's 740 and above. And that's where we sit. That's really good news for us, but it doesn't make us, just rest. We're still proactively every day trying to do everything we can to secure the district. An interesting thing about this tool is that you're also able to compare yourself to your peers. So many companies subscribe to this service, and we can subscribe to a peer group and give us a rating according to our peer companies. And I think they put us in the government segment. So we're in the 92%, better than 92% of our peer groups in that area. And the other thing, as you'll notice down here, I put some these are other sewer districts. Now I've redacted their names because I didn't really want to share their scores. But to give you an idea, I'll let you know that this is an East Coast peer sewer district, similar in size to us. West Coast peer, similar in size to us. We are participate in the 5 cities. You're probably familiar with that. So these are 5 city members. They may not be similar in size, but there are 5 city companies that we collaborate with. And then here's a Midwest peer. So just kind of give you an idea of where we stand. We're up there at 770. These are, and I didn't know this before I put the slide together that where we'd land. But it's nice to see us on top there. But I do want to caution or temper that with, this is one view of our security, and it's not a guarantee, and it doesn't. It doesn't stop us from being concerned and every single day working to mature it and trying to improve it. Well, that's a lot of information. Questions? Thoughts? Okay, well, I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Jenny. Trustee Watson, that is all we had to present today. In this meeting. So next meeting, as I mentioned, will be Tuesday, August 31st, not the 7th as said here. And so you can entertain a motion for adjournment. Motion.
So moved.
Second.
All right, we are adjourned.
Thank you. We're a little behind schedule, so Trustee Nicholson will get things switched out as quickly as we can to start the Program Management Committee.
Welcome to the 220th meeting of the Program Management Committee. Can I get a roll call?
We will note that all trustees are present. Thank you.
Can I get approval for the minutes of the meeting of June 29th?
So moved.
Minutes are approved.
Rich, is there any business?
Good morning, trustees. We'll review the engineering department agenda items. You'll be voting on these at next week's Thursday evening meeting. The first two items are OMCI or stormwater funding appropriations that, as you're aware, our stormwater funding now for capital improvements comes from 6 of our OMCI taxing districts that were turned on last fiscal year. And when we turned those back on, the district made a commitment to the municipalities within those that we would have a grant program that would make funds available to those municipalities in those OMCIs that they could take money to do projects that they felt were necessary. Over the year that this are actually going to be the first 2 grants that we've brought to the board for approval. The first one is the Coldwater Creek OMCI reimbursement. It's to the city of Florissant. This ordinance authorizes the district to enter into an intergovernmental agreement with the city of Florissant for eligible stormwater expenditures where revenue is collected in the Coldwater Creek OMCI subdistrict in St. Louis County. If you recall, eligible stormwater expenditures include storm sewer and inlet construction, drainage improvements, stream bank stabilization and erosion control projects, clearing under bridges or cleaning of detention basins, stormwater planning or engineering costs, and other stormwater-related expenditures determined appropriate by the district. The city of Florissant is requesting funding for a project called Lindsay Lane and Florista Drive Storm Sewer. The city will contract for the engineering services to design approximately 300 feet of storm sewer and appurtenances. The estimated cost for the design work is $21,824. And this agreement will provide for the reimbursement of those design dollars that I spoke of. As far as an appropriation, this action does not require appropriation. We do that once a year. In other words, there was an appropriation earlier last year for all of these grant dollars. And with that appropriation, the city of Florissant, the amount of money that was made available to them was a total of $292,054. So they have that available for reimbursement. They're simply just asking for this one design project at this time. Once they complete that design, then more likely they'll come back for the actual construction of that job under a separate agreement with the district. With that, we're basically asking for your permission to enter into that agreement next week. All right, similar to that one, the next one is the Deer Creek OMCI reimbursement program. This is with the city of Frontenac. Again, this ordinance authorized the district to enter into an intergovernmental agreement with the city of Frontenac for eligible stormwater expenditures where revenue is collected in the Deer Creek OMCI subdistrict in St. Louis County. I won't repeat the eligible stormwater expenditures, but the city of Frontenac is actually doing a study. They're doing a Deer Creek flood protection study. The city will contract for engineering services to investigate potential solutions to flooding from Deer Creek into Monsanto Sunswept Creek in the city of Frontenac. This estimated cost of the study is $125,937, and the agreement provides for a reimbursement of $120,562. And similar to the city of Florissant, the $120,562 was the entire amount that was available that we appropriated last year for the city of Frontenac. They're requesting that amount, and obviously they're paying a little more to get this study done. One thing I will mention is these municipalities do these projects. Everything they do on their side is a benefit to the district as well. So obviously, if they do this study, it'll be made available to us, that we can incorporate, any future projects that they might identify into our system. And that's what we found, that some of the municipalities will probably be utilizing these funds to do studies in their municipality to say, what projects can we do? And then they'll turn around and give us the information, and we'll have them in our system. So it's definitely an advantage to us, this program, and so we're just now, it's taken a little while for them to get started, but we're starting to see more grants or requests coming in.
I have a question about the grants, just generally, not these two specifically, but so when they make an application for a grant, then, I mean, do we always approve that, or is there some like sort of preference that we give people, or?
The general guidance I spoke of in the eligible stormwater expenditures is pretty broad. We want to be pretty basic, but we want them to solve a problem that the district would maybe get a call on. In other words, they have asked, I think we have turned down a municipality. They asked something, we just felt like it didn't really apply to the rules, and I can't recall what it is exactly, but certainly the next one, the next grant, I'll bring that up. But no, it's not a carte blanche. We have a committee an OMCI committee that talk to all the municipalities, and we review those on a monthly basis as they come in. But it's not carte blanche.
I think you saw the description. We did give them a definition of what can be funded, and that comes right out of the OMCI ordinances that developed these original OMCIs. The point of the program is to allow them to put their own prioritization process to the projects. So like Rich says, we review to make sure the money is going to be properly spent, but after that, the whole point is to allow them to do some prioritization that may be different than ours, and they use these funds for that, so.
And then the grants come out of the particular funds based on the taxing district.
Right, so they come out of that taxing district, but we've also calculated what portion of the tax from that taxing district came from that municipality. So they can't steal money from another municipality.
Okay. Understood, thank you.
Any other questions? Like I said, I anticipate we'll be bringing more of those to you. All right, the next item is the Canterbury Enrollment Sanitary Relief Project. This action appropriates funds and authorizes the district to enter into a construction contract. The work to be done consists of construction of approximately 1,700 feet of sanitary sewers, 8 to 15 inch in diameter, and approximately 680 feet of natural channel stabilization and appurtenances. The purpose of this project is to alleviate building backups and overcharged sanitary sewers, and to alleviate yard and structure flooding in the 6900 block of Roland Boulevard in the city of Northwoods and Pasadena Hills. This particular construction project, the district received 6 bids on this project. The low bid was from Aztec Construction Specialties. The low bid was below our designer's estimate, and our appropriation of $1,380,000 is below our budgeted amount. I do want to note that we are actually, since we're doing some creek erosion protection, we're taking funding both from the Sanitary Replacement Fund and from the district Stormwater Fund to fund those 2 separate projects, just taking the opportunity to do both projects at once. Aztec has committed to about 19.31% African-American MBE participation on the project, which meets our 17% goal on the project. All right. The next item is the DC 0203 Sanitary Relief Phase 3 and 4 project. This action appropriates additional funds for an existing construction contract with J.H. Barra. This is a planned appropriation for fiscal year 22. The work being done with this project is construction of approximately 18,000 feet of 8 to 54 inch diameter sanitary sewers and appurtenances, including approximately 4,800 feet of sewer and tunnel of 54 inch, and approximately 1,600 feet of slip lining of existing sewers. The construction is a 3rd phase of a multi-phase improvement project. The purpose of the project is to alleviate surcharging sanitary sewers, and this project will provide for the elimination of 7 constructed SSOs in the Deer Creek watershed. This is one of the district's most critical projects with regard to our 2023 deadlines for the consent decree. JH bears the construction. You can see a lot of it if you travel Highway 40 or 64 in the area around Lindbergh Boulevard. You'll see that's our activity. We're in the process. We're both north and south of 64 along Deer Creek in that area. There's a lot of work going on. This is a partial funding request, a supplemental appropriation for a total of $17,500,000. Will bring the total appropriation on this project to $45,500,000 and fully fund the construction for this project. Been here a long time. This is probably one of our largest open cut projects that I can recall at the district where we're putting in sewer. So things are going well and construction's going good on it. Next project is the Geyer Sanitary Relief and Windsor Springs storage and pump station. This action appropriates funds and authorizes staff to enter into a construction contract. The work consists of the construction of a pump station improvements, including pumps, valves, and other equipment, and approximately 6,200 lineal feet of 10-inch diameter force main, and approximately 107 lineal feet of 12-inch diameter sanitary sewers, and the removal of inflow from 4 private properties. The purpose of this project is to alleviate wet weather building backups and overcharged sanitary sewer, and the elimination of one known SSO at manhole within our system. The district received 2 bids on this project. The low bid was from Understall Contracting Company. The bid was below our design estimate, and an appropriation of $5,400,000, which includes $200,000 for utility relocation, is above the original budget for the project. The original budget did not take into account, if you've got a project map there that shows the location of this project, basically goes right up Geyer Road in Kirkwood, which is, I think we underestimated some of the traffic control with the project and some of the amount of pavement we were going to have to replace. So it's a very difficult job. And due to that, I think that's why we probably only got 2 bids. A lot of the contractors, understood the difficulty of the job. That's where we ended up with the 2 contractors. Understall Contracting Company has committed to just over 17% African-American participation, which meets the goal for the project. All right, the next item is the infrastructure repair annual appropriation for work at our facilities. This action appropriates $3 million of funds for infrastructure repairs to be bid through our purchasing department. The work to be done consists of construction of needed repair, replacement, and improvement projects to address needs at our facilities, such as our wastewater treatment plants and our pump stations. This appropriation will continue the implementation of our infrastructure repair program at our facilities. As projects are identified by our operations group at these pump stations, at our treatment plants, we bid those projects out and utilize this funding. Just to give you some examples, these projects that we do at our facilities tend to be a little larger, where we get into doing major work. Just some projects that we did over the last year. We did some interior line replacement at our Lime wastewater treatment plant in the secondary treatment building. That was a project of about $500,000. We have some pump stations along River to Pear. There was some work done, some flood mitigation work that was done. If you recall, in 2018-19, River to Pear was flooded for a long period of time. And once the river went down, we had some replacement work to do and for future flood mitigation. We had a pump station called Fox Manor Pump Station that reached the end of its useful life, and it had not been placed in the capital program, so we had to make some immediate repairs at that. That project was about $600,000. So generally, it's, the funding's very similar to the infrastructure repair funding we do for the actual sewers. It's just that we end up with larger projects as opposed to the smaller, under 25 type projects. All right, the next item is the St. Jock Sanitary Relief Project. This action appropriates funds and authorizes staff to enter into a construction contract. The work to be done consists of the construction of approximately 381 feet of sanitary sewers, 8 to 15 inches. The purpose of this project is to reduce basement backups and overcharged sewers, and will provide for the elimination of one constructed overflow with this project. The district received 7 bids on this project. The low bid was from Gershenson Construction. The bid was below our design estimate, and an appropriation of $225 was above the budget for the project. The additional costs were due to additional pavement restoration that came about during our review with the municipality, which is the city of Florissant, and due to where we had to relocate the sewer more in the street than we anticipated. We generally like to keep it in the tree lawn, but we had some other utility conflicts. Gershenson is committed to almost 29% MBE participation, which exceeds that 17% goal for African American for the project.
A question. Gershenson, I've seen we've awarded projects to them since the conclusion of that litigation. Have we ever had any problems with them?
No, they've, we required them to totally complete at least one project before we opened them up to continue bidding. That project was completed in a timely manner. And since then, I think this is the 3rd or 4th, but all the projects have been going good. Next project is the Washington Terrace sewer replacement. Appropriates funds and authorizes staff to enter into a construction contract. The work to be done consists of construction of approximately 100 feet of combined sewers, 15 inches in diameter. The purpose of the project is to replace a deteriorated combined sewer in the city of St. Louis. The district received 5 bids for this project. Fred M. Luth and Sons was the low bid. The bid was below our design estimate, and an appropriation of $270,000, which includes utility relocation, is just under our original budget. Fred M. Luth is committed to 17.11% MBE participation, which meets the 17% goal for the project. The next item is the Kingsland Sanitary Storage Facility. This ordinance authorized staff to proceed with further condemnation efforts, including the filing of all necessary court pleadings and documents leading to the acquisition of permanent easement and temporary construction easements on one parcel of ground located in the city of Pagedale, Missouri. This easement is needed to provide permanent access and construction on a permanent monitoring manhole necessary for the operation of this facility. If you go to the map, the map is a property just downstream from our actual storage facility. The storage facility is a 1 million gallon storage facility that's being built up at further up Kingsland. So in order to operate these, we have to monitor manholes both upstream and downstream. Those monitoring manholes tell the storage unit, when to divert flow to the storage unit and when to start allowing flow back out of that storage unit so we can treat it. We have an existing manhole on the system. That's the white dot that you see on the map. But since it's going to have permanent equipment in it that has to be maintained on a regular basis, we have to make sure it's worked and operated. As you can see, the current access is through the woods. And when you have to get to someplace pretty often, we're going to create permanent access to that site. We've been working with this one gentleman, and he's been refusing to work with us, so we want to see if we can get him going. Obviously, there's not much going on that piece of property. We don't think will cause him any issue. We're just trying to work out an agreement. All right, the next item is an emergency repair number 067 on Caln Avenue in the city of St. Louis. This action appropriates funds and authorizes staff to enter into an emergency construction contract. The work to be done consists of construction of approximately 15 feet of 12-inch diameter combined sewer and approximately 15 feet of 24-inch combined sewer and appurtenances. The settling of the 24-inch pipe has caused a cave-in at Caln, which is adjacent to our Union Pacific rail line. It was identified by the railroad, and we were made aware of it, and wanted to get a contractor in there to work on this right away to prevent any disruption. The purpose of the project is to repair damaged pipe and manholes and backfill and repave the street in this area. Based on the recommendation of staff, and the executive director declared this project an emergency on July 17th. The contractor Bates Utility was selected for the emergency declaration policy. The repair, we've stabilized the area and presented our plan for shoring to the railroad, and right now we're just waiting for them to approve our plan. So we've stabilized, we're ready to move. We've given our shoring plan. Before they'll allow us to dig, they typically approve that and they give us a permit. That's really where we're at right now. The estimate of this project is $500,000. There's the contractor is encouraged to use MWBE on an emergency contract. There is no goal. Based on the work that's being done, and there'll be additional paving work and hauling work, we don't see any issue with them reaching that 17%. And this will be brought to you next Thursday for introduction and adoption. All right. The next grouping are mostly design contracts that we have with different firms through within the district, and several of them are actual additional appropriations to ongoing contracts. First one is the Bissell and Lime wastewater treatment facility fluidized bed incinerator project. This appropriates additional funds and authorizes staff to amend a design contract. Again, this is a planned appropriation in fiscal year 22. The ordinance authorized the district to enter amendment number 3 with Black & Veatch for engineering design services for the preparation of 30% design build project documents for solicitation for the Bissell and Lime fluidized bed project. The purpose of the project is to replace the multiple hearth incinerators and solid waste handling facilities and with fluidized bed incinerators, sludge acceptance systems, and solid handling facilities both at our Bissell Point and our Lime wastewater treatment plants to meet regulatory requirements. Black & Veatch will also provide advisory services during the design and construction and startup after the design build selection is complete. The construction cost estimate for this project is $500 million, and construction is anticipated to begin in fiscal year 2023. This appropriation is for $2,050,000 for design services and equal to what was presented in the budget supplement. Future supplemental appropriations will be required for this owner's representative services during the design build, for review of equipment and materials, responding to questions during construction, and the assisting of equipment startup and operator training at the facility once we complete the work. MWE participation, Black & Veatch is committed to approximately 25% participation on this project at the beginning when we were selected. Right, with this amendment, they're planning on utilizing about 24, just under 25%. Right now, the contract they're running about 23.38% with their MWB participation. We don't anticipate any problems. They'll have a lot of inclusion during the construction process. Any questions? All right, the next item is the Cox Creek Pump Station B relocation project. This appropriates funds and authorizes staff to amend a design contract. Again, this is a planned appropriation for fiscal year 2022. Authorizes staff to enter into Amendment 1 with Tubino Wade and Merchant for the design of the Cox Creek Pump Station relocation. Cox Creek Pump Station is a lump sum cost for the design and preparation construction documents to construct a new triplex submersible pump station in a new location. It involves sewer relocations of 290 feet of 18-inch diameter sewer and 210 feet of 18-inch diameter force main, and many other items with this. The purpose of the project is to replace an inadequate pump station facility where there's no space for expansion or secondary storage at the current site. There's no secondary power, and we're relocating for various reasons. Due to the complexities of pump station site selection, we're doing the project in 2 phases. The first phase is completion of a technical memorandum evaluating sites for future property acquisition, for maintenance access, and utility coordination. The second phase is for the design services, where we'll do the surveying, geotechnical, and pump station design and bid the project out, and then obviously there'll be construction phase services. The total construction cost estimate for this project is anticipated at $8 million and is planned to start in fiscal year 2023. Our appropriation for this fiscal year is $1,035,000 and is equal to what's presented in our budget supplement. TWM has committed to 26.84% MWB participation. There's no work anticipated with what they have planned for this amendment, but right now they're tracking right at that 26.84%. All right, the next item is the Altura wet weather storage facility. This appropriates additional funds and authorizes staff to amend a design contract, again with planned funding for fiscal year 2022. The ordinance for this ordinance authorizes the district to amendment number 2 with KAI 360 Construction Services for engineering design services for the 30% conceptual design build documents and support for the RFQ and RFP selection for the Altura wet weather storage facility. The purpose of this project is to construct a wet weather storage facility to alleviate sanitary sewer surcharging and building backups during wet weather. KAI will also provide advisory services under future supplemental appropriations during the design, construction, and startup after the design build selection is complete. Construction cost estimate for this project is $10 million, and construction is anticipated to start in fiscal year 2023. Our appropriation of $100,000 for design services is equal to the proposed budget funding in our capital improvement program. KAI is committed to 45.3% MWB participation. They're planning about just under 7% for the work they have planned for this fiscal year. Right now, they're running about 41.8% participation. KAI is also a minority firm as well, so we don't anticipate any problems meeting their commitment. Next item is the General Services Agreement Facility and Sewer Design Contract B. This appropriates additional funds and authorizes staff to amend the design contract for funds planned in the fiscal year 22 budget. It authorizes amendment number 3 to CDG engineers for various design projects in the CIP and our operation budget. This contract is for a total maximum of $50,000. Projects will be issued by letter agreement. This amendment will bring the total design appropriation to $850,000. The appropriation is equal to what we had in the budget for CDG. CDG has committed 25%. Right now, they're running a little behind on that at 18.54. These projects the MWB is really dictated by the type of work we give them. In some cases, the work we give them doesn't really give them opportunity to actually utilize a firm. It doesn't require surveying or some other technical aspect of the teams that they have identified there. But we work to get to that 25% goal. All right. And then I'm going to finalize the last 4 items that I'm going to talk about are for what we call support services, both for the engineering and the operations division. They support activities that my staff, for design services, for modeling services, in the work we do to design our projects and to provide for the consent decree. They also provide services for our operations division in support of the CMOM program. So I'm going to go through all 4 of these items. I think one of them is a new procurement. The others are renewal of existing contracts that we have with various vendors for these services. The first item is a critical infrastructure assessment and asset investigation. This appropriates additional funds and authorizes staff to amend the contract. It authorizes the amendment number 4 with Trek Design Group. The purpose of this contract is to provide staff with the detailed information regarding sewer systems by performing services such as project inspection reconnaissance, field investigations of sewer systems and structures, inspection prioritization, and project setup, field verification, map updates. They do special investigations of some of our flood wall pump stations and additional work order management and post-inspection review. These services perform the basis for the district-led CMOM program that I talked about earlier. In other words, they do some reconnaissance work prior to sending our crews out there, and where our crews aren't out there, unable to find certain facilities that we have out there. This contract for critical infrastructure assessment is for $1,700,000. This will be the final renewal of this 3-year contract. So before I bring this to you next year, we'll go out and seek vendors for this particular services. This was actually was performed by another firm for several years. So this was the first 3-year contract with this particular firm, and they performed really well. So we have several firms out there that can do this for us. So this will be the final year of that contract. The appropriation of the $1.7 million is equal to what we had presented in the budget. All right, the next services is for flow metering and monitoring. This appropriates funds and authorizes staff to enter into a contract with ADS Environmental Services. The purpose of this contract is to provide district staff with flow and level information in separate sanitary sewers, combined sewers, and storm sewer systems during wet and dry weather at approximately 300 different locations throughout the district. And we do these flow monitoring on these manholes anywhere from 3 months to 12 months. Some of them are permanent monitors and some of them are temporary monitors. The data is a diagnostic tool that help us use to meet the consent decree requirements by refining our hydraulic models, determining project effectiveness, and to support our inflow and infiltration investigation. Again, the data that we get from these meters is utilized primarily by my engineering staff and my modeling staff to go back into the models both before we do a project and then after we do a project to verify that the work we've done has done what we wanted it to do. So, and it's really critical because then we utilize these models to confirm to the EPA when the consent decree is finally done that the work that we did met with the requirements of the consent decree. So it's pretty critical work. And again, this right here was a contract we just went out for renewal. We had a 5-year contract. The previous contract was with ADS as well. And prior to that, the district had done this internally. with our staff and found that because of turnover and accuracy of data, it was better suited to go out to a contractor to do this work. So again, we've been doing this since we started the consent decree. But when we went out for the purchasing division went out, they actually solicited 89 different vendors, all over the United States to do this work. Unfortunately, ADS was the only one that submitted a proposal. Probably the fact that they've done it for us for a number of years probably scared a few of the other ones away. And 300 meters is probably one of the larger metering programs that we have, that any agency has. So based on their proposal and their ability to perform this work, so we're recommending awarding this contract to them. There is some subcontract services. There's no MBE goal on this professional services, but they do utilize a couple firms, and they anticipate getting about 13% MWB participation. All right, couple items left. The next item is stream flow gauge operation and maintenance. This action appropriates funds and authorizes staff to enter into agreement with the U.S. Geological Survey. The work to be done is to continue to collect stream gauging information in 25 watersheds. For fiscal year 22, the U.S. will continue to operate and maintain a network of 40 stream gauging stations for 25 watersheds throughout the district. Again, the data will be used to provide reliable flood peak and stage estimates for our hydraulic models on our streams throughout the area, and calculations for projects that the district performs within those basins. The data and calculations are typically used for water quality data evaluation and modeling, post-construction monitoring for our CSO long-term control plan as well. This is an annual contract, a partnering effort with USGS, which is a federal agency. This data is very valuable. If we didn't provide supplemental funding to the U.S., the program would be dropped. It's something we looked at one time to whether we would do it, and they have all the equipment and everything to do this, so it's not something that we would bring in-house. So we continue to partner with them. The total program itself is about $567,000. The district provides $489,000. But again, it's very integral in us being able to calibrate our models for utilization for our consent decree and our water quality monitoring. Then our last one is our stream flow water quality sampling. Appropriates additional funds and authorizes staff to amend contract with Geosyntac Consultants. The appropriation of $267,169 will be for this amendment. The purpose of the work is to perform water quality samplings to comply with our post-construction monitoring program required by our consent decree. Samples will be collected from 6 sites on the Mississippi River on a biweekly basis. Samples will also be collected from 3 sites on the Missouri River once every 4 weeks to help establish water quality background concentrations in the St. Louis area. Field water quality analysis and stream observations are also a requirement of the consent decree. Our water quality monitoring is required by the EPA and DNR to demonstrate water quality compliance standards. Again, part of the consent decree. The original contract with this vendor allowed for 1 year with an option year to renew for 2 additional years. This amendment is for the 3rd year of the 3-year contract. So this will be another one next year that we do go out and seek proposals on. Very specialized work, taking boats out onto the Mississippi and the Missouri rivers and taking samples at different locations. Pretty safety conscious type work. I know the district at one time we had a boat and did some of this, but it's very treacherous, so we feel like this is definitely something we would want to contract out. Again, we'll be rebidding that next year. Again, the appropriation for the service is $267,169, and that's slightly below the $270 that we had budgeted. And Mr. DeCosa, that concludes my report.
Thank you, Rich. Our next meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, August 31st. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you.
Try, if everybody move the stuff up or keep it, whichever one you want, we'll switch over for finance and trustee affairs. As we're switched over, we're able to go.
You can have my water.
Finance Committee of the Metropolitan St. Louis Sewer District. Assume the minutes will reflect that all trustees are present. Can I get a motion for approval of the minutes from June 29th, please?
So moved.
Second.
Minutes are approved. Next, we have the portfolio update.
All right, thank you. Portfolio update is the sheet we look at every month, four grids or four squares on the one page. I'm going to start in the upper left. Total par amount invested was $646 million as of the end of July. That's about $12 million down from last month. We had some SRF payments due, and capital plan spending was just higher than the money that we brought in. The yield to maturity on our portfolio is roughly flat to where it was last year. We had about $75 million of new investments. We went out pretty long on the curve with some agencies to get some yield and invested more in commercial paper, which is short-term but has a higher yield than treasuries. The benchmark is all treasuries, so that yield dropped from about 27 basis points to 18 basis points. So interest rates on the short end continue to fall, go down. Our portfolio stayed roughly the same. So we're still significantly above the benchmark, but if rates turn around and go back up, we'll lag going up just as we've lagged coming down. The weighted average maturity for our portfolio, we went out a little bit longer, so it went from about 1.06 years to 1.16, just a little uptick. Benchmark was about flat. Moving over to the sector allocation on the upper right, we're within policy limits, so we're in compliance with the policy. We have a little bit less in the interest-bearing collateralized deposits and treasury notes than we did last month. We went up in the agencies and commercial paper. Again, that was to get some yield, keeping the quality very high of the investments. Nothing significant to point out in the fund summary. That's just roughly where the money is. And then the maturity distribution just shows you the difference between the benchmark and the portfolio. Benchmark are the red bars. Everything in there is a 1 to 3 year treasury because we need money for operations and that sort of thing, as evidenced by this month. Since we spent $12 million more than we brought in, we keep money more on the short end as well. So we have liquidity. Any questions about the portfolio? All right, next I'm going to move to a couple of resolutions that we have. Every once in a while we'll come to you with something like this. The first one is a resolution to add a depository bank to our approved list. This is CIBC Bank, which is a large Canadian bank. So we have a developer that banks with CIBC. They, when there are construction projects, they can put forward some cash for deposit, or a lot of times they'll use a letter of credit. And they want to issue a letter of credit from their bank. Their bank is not on our approved list, so this is just asking you to add them to the approved list so that they can provide a letter of credit from that bank so that as the deposit, so that we can start the project. Any questions about how that works. CIBC Bank, the Canadian banks have been well capitalized. This is a large bank. We do credit review, but there's no issues. We have no concerns with that bank. There is a list of all of the approved banks as part of the resolution as well. The next resolution is to add a broker-dealer. So when we invest our money, we typically do kind of look for blind bids from a group of security dealers. These are generally, large banks. But Alamo Capital is a bank that reached out to us. They do provide investment services. And so by adding a bank, all it really does is increase the competition. So it helps us potentially get better bids. So what we'll do is we'll go out, we'll say we need $10 million maturing around this time. Give us your best security that fits our parameters. So we have parameters on credit quality. It has to be an agency or a treasury, that sort of things. And so what we do is we get these blind bids from all these different banks, and then we pick the one that best fits our needs, has the best yield and fits the parameters that we gave. So by adding a securities dealer, all we're doing is increasing the competition, hopefully improving the yield we can get on our investment. So that's why we do that. The other piece of this is just to note some changes in the list of primary government securities dealers. That's not a list we maintain. The primary government securities dealers are, by definition in our policy, all approved securities dealers, but we do maintain a list, and there were some banks that dropped out and some that were added. So this resolution also just updates the list. Any questions on that one? All right, so the meat of this meeting is going to be the next piece. So we're going to talk about forward direct purchase of refunding bonds. So in, I guess, layman's term, refunding means refinancing. So when I talk about refunding bonds, we're talking about issuing bonds to replace existing bonds to lower costs, like you would refinance a mortgage or that sort of thing. On the phone, we've got our municipal advisors. We have Bethany Pugh and Matt Schnackenberg from PFM and Tiana Pooler from IPA. They're here just to help with questions and to put me back on the right track if I go off script here or something. But what I want to talk about with the refunding bonds is we're going to go a little bit, since a lot of you are new, into kind of what we look at when we look at refinancing our bonds and why we think this is a good opportunity. So generally, like I said, think of this as a refinancing. What we're doing is to lower the principal and interest that we're paying on outstanding bonds. And unlike when maybe you would refinance a mortgage, or you might, do another 30-year mortgage, we're also not looking to lengthen the term of the bonds. So we're looking to lower not only the annual principal and interest payments, but the overall principal and interest that's due. So we're not looking at if we've issued 30-year bonds and we're 5 years in, we're not looking at issuing another 30-year bond to replace those bonds. We'd be looking at a 25-year bond to keep the maturity profile the same. Just to talk a little bit about refundings, normally when we issue bonds in the capital markets, they have what's called a call date. And we usually issue 30-year bonds. They have a 10-year call date. That means within 10 years, we can pay off those bonds free and clear. We've committed to the investors that those bonds will be outstanding for at least 10 years. Now, sometimes we'll have an opportunity to potentially, we want to refinance earlier than those 10 years because interest rates have fallen enough. So there's a tool that we can use called advance refunding. And in advance refunding, what you do is you issue the bonds before the call date, but instead of paying off the bonds, because you can't, you would invest that money, you put it in an escrow account, and you'd have to borrow enough to pay the interest due on the amount of bonds that you want to call. And then at the call date, those bonds would then get paid off. So you're usually borrowing more than the amount of bonds that are outstanding because you have to pay the interest up until the call date. And then at the call date, the old bonds are paid off, and the investors, are happy enough. In 2017, tax law changed. We're no longer allowed to do that with tax-exempt bonds. Usually we'll issue tax-exempt bonds because there's a lower cost. The investors don't have to pay federal income tax on the interest they receive from us, so they'll accept a lower like a lower coupon or a lower interest on the bonds. We can still issue taxable bonds and do an advance refunding, but taxable bonds usually are a little bit higher cost than tax-exempt bonds, but rates have come down enough, sometimes that opportunity still makes sense. We did that a couple of years ago. We had big savings when we issued an advanced taxable bonds. Another option would be to do a current refunding, which is when you wait until that call date, but sometimes the opportunity is there to save money today. You don't want to wait, 1, 2, 3, 4 years and just to see if that opportunity is still there. So another option is what we're going to talk about today is a forward direct purchase refunding, where you enter into a contract to lock in today's rates to issue bonds in the future when the bonds become payable. So instead of issuing new bonds today, you enter into a contract to lock in today's rates with a spread to account for the fact that we'd expect rates to rise a little bit over time, but then to not actually issue the bonds until the bonds are callable in a few years. So that's what we're going to talk about today. All right, so the next page, Janice, thanks. Just a little bit of a comparison between a taxable advance refunding and the forward direct purchase. We've already talked about some of these. Taxable advance refunding, you would borrow today, you put the money in an escrow account, and then it would pay off the bonds when they become payable. Forward direct purchase, you're not issuing bonds today, you're just entering into a contract today to issue the bonds when they're callable. It's a lower borrowing amount usually to do a forward direct purchase because you don't have to account for the interest that's going to be due between now and the call date. You're just worried about the principal amount of bonds that are being called at the call date. So you got a little bit lower borrowing amount, which lowers your borrowing costs on the forward direct purchase. On the forward direct purchase, we can still use tax-exempt rates, which are usually a little bit lower. I do want to just mention, especially for those of you that haven't been through the bond discussion before, one of the differences between taxable rates and tax-exempt rates, on a taxable rate, you're usually using a treasury scale. They're published. There's some kind of spread for credit quality, but they're low coupons, and usually they have less optionality, meaning you might have less of an opportunity to refinance those again in the future. Tax-exempt rates use what's called the MMD scale, Municipal Market Data Scale. It's published by Thomson Reuters. They usually, and when we issue tax-exempt bonds, we're issuing at a higher than market coupon rate. Historically, it's been usually 5%. But because that's higher than the market rate, you get a premium on those bonds. So if we need $120 million, we might be able to borrow only 100, but since it's a higher coupon rate than market, the bondholder or the investors will give us 120 million instead of 100 million. So the amount we have to pay back is the 100 million, but we get 120 million of proceeds up front. And essentially, you're paying that back through the higher interest rate. But so there's different, but that gives you, that higher coupon rate usually gives you more opportunity in the future to refinance again. And so every time we do a refinancing like this, we'll look at all the options available and pick the one that makes the most sense. And so we'll go through here why we think that the direct purchase makes more sense right now than the taxable advance refunding. Well, we already talked a little bit about the curve that we use. And again, the bonds, when we go to the capital markets, if we did an advance refunding issued to the large institutional investors like insurance companies, that's usually a little bit more work. It's more cost. We'll talk about that in a little bit too. And it just takes a little bit longer to pull off because you've got to go to the rating agencies ahead of time, get your ratings. There's a big marketing period where you're creating a lot of marketing materials that you're pitching to the investors before you issue the bonds. On the forward direct purchase, tax exempt, you're dealing with usually one counterparty. You enter in a contract to lock in today's rates, and it's a little bit quicker to execute. Next slide. So the reasons we might do a forward direct purchase, I talked about potentially quicker execution. If today's rates are low, we want to try to attack those as quickly as we can, not wait for them to potentially increase. We don't have to issue offering statements or get the ratings. Like I said before, we go to market. We'll still need to get a rating, but we can do it after we sign the contract. No marketing to a big pool, so we can act much more quickly. This, the ordinance right before you also is an introduction and adoption. So we'll introduce and adopt at one meeting, just so that we can act quickly and take advantage of the low rates that are there today. Next point says potentially greater savings in taxable advance refunding. I wouldn't be bringing this to you if currently there's not a better savings than the taxable advance refunding. We'll look at the numbers in a second. The forward direct purchase gives you certainty of future bond sale. You don't have to, again, wait and see what rates will do. It lets you act right now to lock in rates. And again, less paperwork, marketing, lower overall cost of issuance. So we'll get less ratings. There's actually less lawyers involved, so there's less cost involved. The savings opportunity. So right now we're looking at the 2016 bonds that we issued. There's about 122 million par value of bonds that are going to be due after the call date. Based on the current rates, we expect this to yield a total savings of more than $20 million, actually closer to almost 25 million, between 24 and 25 million based on the rates we looked at last week. So that's over $1 million per year for the remaining term of the bonds. That's pretty significant savings. The other candidates could surface. Right now, this is where the biggest savings opportunity is. There could be other bonds we've issued in the past that could also fit with this structure. So the ordinance actually asks for permission to transact another transaction like this if the opportunity presents itself through the end of the fiscal year. This is, we did do a transaction like this last year, asked for the same thing. We ended up not doing another transaction after the initial one because the opportunities weren't as good. But just so you know that this ordinance does also give authority to issue another one of these transactions over the course of the fiscal year if the opportunity presents itself. That's just so that we can, again, act quickly.
Is that on the same initial offer?
It'd be potentially a different offering, different bonds, so it's a little bit wide open. If that's something you're uncomfortable with, that's something we can change, but just because of the, the ability to act quickly when the opportunity presents itself, that's why we're asking for it.
But Tim, you will be restricted by the parameters that are in the initial resolution.
Right, so and that's the next point here. So what we do is we set up parameters of these bonds. Like it'll always have a minimum of, in this case, a 10% net present value savings over the bonds being refunded. Cost of issuance will be, less than a certain percentage of the issuance, that sort of thing. It's 60 basis points, and I expect that to be high. So all the parameters are set with a little bit of cushion just for flexibility because things move around. But I expect, we have to come in under that or we wouldn't execute, but I expect it will be significantly lower than that. It would be lower also than if we did a traditional bond market deal, which is something that we look at before we do this. Also, our municipal advisors are on the phone, our fiduciaries, so they will also come in afterwards and give you a report on what was executed, why we did it. So it's just another kind of check afterwards. Yes, everything. And we have a bond counsel that will not let us do something outside of the parameters as well. So there's other parties that are watching this to make sure that we're executing is the best deal for the district. And then, as I mentioned, we'll continue to review other structures too, just to make sure that we're picking the best one.
I have a question.
Yes.
So you mentioned the one that we did last year. Was that a taxable advance refunding or a forward direct purchase?
That one was a forward direct purchase. Okay. So we have done a forward direct purchase before. When we did, that was the first one that we've ever done. There's a number of other municipalities throughout the country that have done them. They are more, they're not as common as an advance refunding. So we've done both. We've done taxable advance refundings and we've done the forward direct purchase. When I say that last year when we did the forward direct purchase, and that ordinance also gave us the ability to do other transactions. That was through the end of last year, so that's expired. That's what I meant. I'm asking for exactly the same thing that we did previously.
And that one that we did last year was incredibly successful. Right?
It was very successful. So that one we actually looked at bonds that had been issued in 2011, 2012, 2013, and 2015. So it was a series of bonds. The first set of those was finalized earlier this year when we paid off the 2011 bonds. We've got another one then coming due next year, then again in 2023, and again in 2025. But the rates are already set, the savings are already set. And so that was kind of the benefit of doing that is we saw a significant savings opportunity. It let us take advantage of it then. in a way that was more beneficial than doing a advance refunding, the kind of the traditional way that we've done it. We'll go to the next slide, Janice. So a couple of things that just to consider, and you'll see this in the savings. One thing with the forward direct purchase, the savings are delayed until the bonds are issued. If we did an advance refunding, you'd start saving right away because you're issuing bonds now. The savings are delayed, but the overall savings is still higher, and the present value of the savings is still higher doing the forward direct purchase. Some of the costs of issuance are going to be payable up front. Usually when we issue bonds, we pay the cost of issuance out of the bond proceeds. Here, we're not going to be able to do that because we're executing the contract now, but we're not receiving the bond proceeds till later, so we'll work with everyone else to find the money for the cost of issuance. As I mentioned, the ordinance provides board authorization to enter into other direct purchase contracts for the remainder of the fiscal year. And then there are certain risks that we do have since the bonds aren't going to be issued in the future. For example, if our credit quality falls below investment grade, which we should not expect, then that would end the transaction. The counterparty is going to be a large bank. If they somehow failed, that would kill the transaction. If tax law changes and tax-exempt bonds are no longer allowed to be issued, which we don't expect, then the transaction would have to change or end. So there's just things like that could happen, but we don't expect. But those are kind of some of the outstanding risks. Next page gives you just summarizes the savings opportunity right now. So if we did a taxable advance refunding, which is on the far right, we would expect, I have these in kind of 5-year buckets just to make it a little bit easier to read. So we'd be looking at, a little bit over $800,000 a year savings, which is not a bad savings, starting immediately over about 25 years. So in between 21 and $22 million of savings overall, present value just a little over 17 million. The forward direct purchase refunding, so this will be, again, locking in today's rates with a spread increase to account for the fact that we're actually not issuing bonds for 5 years. We don't start saving until fiscal year 2027, which is in 5 years, but the savings are much bigger, about 1.3 million per year. Total savings almost 25 million. Net present value of those savings is over 18 million. So this is something we'll continue to monitor, but bigger savings on the forward direct purchase, which is why that is what we're proposing.
And do we have any need for immediate savings or savings before 2027?
We don't. So we are, the bond parameters that we set, our debt service is lower than what we'd forecast when we set rates. So because we've already had some previous refundings that have given us significant savings. We're not doing this because we need savings. We're doing it just because there's an opportunity, and it's prudent to take advantage of the opportunity. And so we have the ability to take the bigger savings as opposed to trying to get some savings now to make sure that we're solvent or something like that. Next page, just a little bit about the ordinance. Some of these we talked about. The provisions of the master bond ordinance are going to be very similar to all our other senior debt, no material differences. The holder of this debt is going to be on the same level as the holder of our other senior lien debt. This will authorize us to enter into all the agreements necessary to make the transaction happen, which is typical. It actually allows for a taxable or tax-exempt refunding. So if taxable rates can move so much that taxable made more sense than tax-exempt direct purchase forward, we could switch and do that.
Is that before or after closing?
Before the bonds are issued. The parameters will be built into the ordinance, and I've got a slide just a little bit on the parameters next, and then there'll be a certificate of final terms. So while we talk about what the parameters are, when this is done, we'll come back and say, here's what we actually achieved, and here's how it compared to the parameters, just so you can see that. So the main parameters are on the next slide. Net present value savings is not less than 10%. We've issued refunding bonds before with 7, 8, 9% savings. Our policy requires a minimum of 3%. We're usually well above that. This one is 15% currently, so this is very good. Final maturity, not later than the final maturity of the bonds to be refunded, so we're not saving on an annual basis just by extending and spreading the bonds out longer. We're actually keeping the end date the same, but just lowering principal and interest, not just annually, but overall. Cost of issuance won't exceed 60 basis points of the original principal amount. The optional, again, I expect another 10-year call, so we'll have another opportunity to repay these bonds or refund them. True interest cost is not to exceed 4% for taxes and bonds, 5% for taxable refunding bonds. Right now, last time we did this, I think we said 4.5% and 5.5%. Right now, we actually expect these to be in the lower 3, so well below the 4%. But we don't know how rates are going to move, so we give it a little bit of cushion here. If the savings disappeared, obviously we wouldn't issue. We wouldn't do this. I think in your packet there's also a detail sheet. It doesn't have any new information. There's the actual page from the ordinance that lists the parameters as well, which is really what I went through. Just maybe a little bit more detail or explanation in there, but this is a good savings opportunity, 15%, almost $25 million. So I think it's prudent to execute the direct forward purchase. So that's what I wanted to talk about today. It will be at the board, on an ordinance at the board meeting for intro and adopt next week. Any questions about that? And that's a lot of information. Okay, all right, Bethany and Matt and Tiana, thanks for your time.
Thank you. Thank you.
Nice to hear your voice.
When we can. When we can, because they are fiduciaries to the district. We use them for all these evaluations. They work with a lot of companies they issue. They're in the market every day. We're in the market once, maybe twice a year looking at bonds. They're in it every day, so they know the market. They're a good source of advice. When we can, we'll have them back in here so that you can meet them and talk to them. Actually, a bank brought this to us. So when we did this last year, they'll continually run different kind of refunding options for us. Generally, they're looking at advance refundings. But we have, because we issue frequently, because we have a lot of debt outstanding, and we get calls from banks that are in our approved pool and outside of it regularly presenting different opportunities. And so this was one from a bank that actually did want the forward purchase that we did last year, but another bank just had better terms. They came back with another opportunity, and so right now they've have kind of the best terms that we've seen.
What would you make of that?
Currently,
Hey, Ken?
yes? Bethany?
Sorry, hey, this is Bethany. I stuck around. I wanted to add, the proposals that the district got last year from the bank you executed with last year and this one are not proposals that everybody gets. It's, I think, a reflection of the district's reputation and the desire that folks have to work with you, that they're bringing options like this to the fore. I just want to make that point. It's obviously a really great and good thing for the district. It's not what I would call common that these types of proposals come into folks on a day-to-day basis. So I just want to point that out.
Yep, thank you. That's more believable coming from you than if I said it. But Morgan Stanley was the bank that we dealt with last time. Right now, we're primarily talking to Barclays. We've had a couple other banks that have pitched something, not to this size, but for these bonds as well. Okay, that's all I had on that. Last item on the agenda is Marion's.
Thank you, Tim. The Finance Department, we're in the process of closing out our fiscal year 21 year end. We have a June 30th year end, so we're right now working with the auditors to get the audit completed. We will be reporting that back to you in the next couple of months. But what I wanted to do today is to kind of give you a preliminary update on our expenditures and our revenues. So you should have in your packet a one-page document with two charts on it. One which will show expenditures and the other which will show some information regarding our wastewater charges. So I'm going to start with that chart. It's labeled Finance Key Performance Indicators. These are unaudited numbers. And so what we're projecting right now for FY21 is that we will see a favorable budget variance of about $49 million for expenditures. I expect these numbers to change a little bit as we kind of go through the audit process and we post additional entries. So I'll go through each of the components that make up our expenditures. So on the debt service side, we're actually projecting that we will be about $7 million above budget. And the primary reason for that is when we do these refundings that Tim mentioned, we don't budget for refundings. So we take a conservative approach. So even though we've spent money for refundings, that means we're actually saving money as a result of doing that, but we just don't budget for that savings. So we paid more in principal to refund bonds as a result of savings. We, again, don't put that in our budget numbers. So on the operating side, right now we're projecting that we'll be about $11 million below budget. Again, I anticipate that that number will reduce somewhat by about probably $2 to $3 million, which is typically where we come in at. For our capital program, we're about $45 million below budget. Of that $45 million, $8 million of it will be transferred into FY22 as a result of projects we're not able to do in 21, but we will need to do in FY22. So the true savings is roughly about $37 million. So in total, we're looking at about $41 million of projected savings when you account for that transfer of the capital dollars that we'll do in 22 on the expenditure side. Now going over to the next chart, which depicts our wastewater revenues, our budget is at this point is about $14 million unfavorable. The bulk of that relates to our commercial revenues. They are about $13 million below budget expectations. That's primarily the result of commercial businesses using less water, which translates into reduced sewer bills. So we are seeing in FY21 a decline in the water volume that was used when compared to our budget. That's not unexpected given the impact of the pandemic. So good news is that most of these, the reductions that we saw were kind of early on into the fiscal year through like December. We have seen a rebound in terms of commercial usage for the last 6 months of the fiscal year. We're hoping that that will continue over into the current fiscal year, which started in July. So again, financially, I think this kind of indicates that we're in good shape with respect to our actual budget results. We will continue to monitor our revenues and make adjustments as needed to those budget levels. Any questions about the performance indicators? Okay, just one more quick item that's actually not on the agenda, but I just want to take a moment to update the board that the district is actually running what's called the triple crown in finance. It's not a horse race, of course, but what it involves is that we are members of the Government Finance Officers Association. We publish 3 documents that are reviewed by that organization, which represents about roughly 7,400 members throughout the U.S. and Canada. So our 3 documents that we publish and are reviewed by that organization to make sure that we are following generally accepted accounting principles and that the documents themselves are transparent and can be easily read by customers. In some cases are, of course, our budget document, that's done, it's actually reviewed, our annual comprehensive financial report, which is really the financial report that you'll find our footnotes and our financial statements and the audit opinion in. And then we have another document which is called a popular annual financial report. That is really intended for folks that really aren't looking for technical financial information, but they want kind of a general assessment of how the district's finances are doing. So a lot of our customers look at that document. We actually send that to some of the schools as an educational tool that teachers use as well. We were awarded certificates of excellence in financial reporting for all 3 of those documents, and less than 4% of public entities throughout the U.S. and Canada received that Triple Crown Award. So just wanted to take a moment to recognize the finance team that spends a lot of energy working on these documents. We get assistance from Tim and his group. Our public affairs group also writes part of the narratives that are included in the documents. And truthfully, all of the departments here at MSD contribute to the development of those documents. So I just want to take a moment to thank those individuals. That's all that I have. Thank you.
Congratulations, Marion and Tim. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so unless there's any other business for this meeting, the next meeting is tentatively scheduled for Tuesday, August 31st. Do we have a motion to adjourn? Meeting is concluded. Thank you.
Push up your documents or keep them. We'll switch them around. Trustee Wilson, we will be able to go as soon as everything's set.
Thank you. Welcome everybody to the Stakeholder Relations Committee meeting of August 2021. Can I get a roll call, please?
We'll note that all trustees are still present.
Thank you. There are no comments by the chair. Can I get approval or motion to approve the committee meeting minutes of June?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, if there are no objections, the minutes are approved. The next item on the agenda is a discussion of the conflict of interest policy. Todd?
Good morning, trustees. My name is Todd Ashbacher. I'm one of the attorneys in the legal department, and I am here on behalf of the General Counsel, Susan Myers. Susan asked me to present for your consideration the district's conflict of interest policy. Now, the conflict of interest policy sets forth the guidelines that apply and govern potential conflicts of interest by district employees and by board members. The policy has been in place at MSD for a long time, many years, with periodic updates, of course. Now, the Missouri statutes and ethics rules require a municipal corporation like MSD to review and reapprove its conflict of interest policy at least once every 2 years. MSD is required to reapprove our policy no later than September 15th of this year. Now, the policy we are presenting for the board's approval is identical to the existing policy that was approved by the Board of Trustees 2 years ago, except there are a few minor changes to sections 2 and 4 of the policy. Those changes were recommended by the directors when they reviewed the policy. The changes clarify responsibility for interpretation and administration of the conflict of interest policy in light of the fact that certain positions, namely the executive director, the secretary treasurer, and the internal auditor, they report directly to the Board of Trustees and are not subject to the civil service rules. Excuse me. The revised policy has been reviewed by the executive director, and as I said, by all of the directors. It has also been reviewed by the internal auditor, Brown, Smith, and Wallace. It is being presented to the board for approval. Are there any questions that I might answer for any of the board members? If not, that's all I have. Thank you very much.
Where is the policy?
Oh, I'm sorry, the policy was sent to the board member. Received it, Susan Meyer sent it to you
Yeah, it was.
Okay, that one.
Okay, if you need it again, let us know, and we'll send it off again, if needed. And I have a copy here, I'll be glad to share with you. Thank you, Todd.
Okay, thank you, Todd.
Thank you.
Okay, the next. Apologies. Next item on the agenda is this discussion of the district's classification plan. Tracy?
I'm right here.
I had the front.
Good morning, trustees.
Good morning.
I'd like to bring your attention to proposed ordinance 15745, which is the classification plan. The classification plan lists all of the job titles available to candidates and current employees here at the district. We're going to be making some changes to this plan, and that's why I'm bringing it forward. The changes consist of adding a new position, which is a senior public affairs specialist, which will be a C4 position. It's a needed position in that particular department. The next changes are for the operations department, which is taking two positions that should have been put into the last ordinance for the union updates, which is the fleet mechanic helper 1, now being called the heavy equipment helper 1. And then the next position is taking the treatment plant pump station managers and the sewer maintenance construction rehab manager, and giving that one title, which is just the operations manager, which is more inclusive of what they're currently doing. These are the changes that we're proposing to the classification plan. Are there any questions from the trustees? All right, thank you guys for your time.
Okay. There's no further business. Our next meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, October 31st, 2021. I'll entertain a motion for adjournment. Second. Okay. There are no objections. It's been a pleasure in my life again. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, everybody, for the time.
Thank you.